In a fog-shrouded manner, detectives Sherlock Holmes, Hercule Poirot, and Miss Marple face a chilling summons from the keeper of the key. Hunted by shadow creatures and a malevolent force, they uncover the Raven's heart, a cursed gem binding a village's souls. Racing against time, they confront Gideon Blackthorne's ghostly will, battling mirrors that twist reality and a shadow beyond that hungers for their blood. Will their united minds break the pact before dawn, or become its eternal prisoners? Chapter 1. The Mysterious Invitation. The fog clung to the cobbled streets of London like a shroud, muffling the clatter of horse-drawn carriages and the distant toll of Big Ben. It was an autumn evening in 1925, and the air carried a damp chill that seemed to seep into the bones of anyone foolish enough to linger outdoors. At 221B Baker Street, Sherlock Holmes sat by the fire, his lean frame silhouetted against the flickering flames, his violin resting silently on the table. His sharp eyes, usually alight with restless energy, were fixed on a single sheet of paper in his hand. A letter, delivered by a courier whose face he could not recall, though he had tried. The letter was peculiar, not for its content, but for its tone. Written in a meticulous, almost mechanical script, it bore no signature, only an embossed seal, a raven clutching a key in its talons. The words were polite, yet they carried an undercurrent of menace, like a velvet glove concealing a blade. Mr. Holmes, your reputation as a man of unparalleled deduction precedes you. I invite you to Blackthorne Manor, a place of secrets and shadows, where a matter of grave importance awaits. Come alone, but know that others of your ilk will join you. The truth you seek will demand all your faculties. A carriage will arrive at precisely midnight on the 13th of October. Do not decline, for to do so would be to invite consequences you cannot foresee. Yours in anticipation, the keeper of the key. Holmes's lips curled into a faint, mirthless smile. He had received countless invitations in his career, some from desperate clients, others from cunning adversaries, but none had ever stirred in him such a curious blend of intrigue and unease. The date mentioned was tonight, and the clock on the mantelpiece showed it was already past 10. He glanced at the window where the fog pressed against the glass like a living thing, and made his decision. "Watson," he called, his voice sharp but steady. There was no response. Dr. John Watson, his steadfast companion, was away visiting a patient in the countryside. Holmes was alone, and for once the solitude felt oppressive. He rose, donned his overcoat, and tucked the letter into his pocket. The game, it seemed, was afoot. Meanwhile, in the quaint village of St. Mary Mead, Miss Jane Marple sat in her cozy parlor, her knitting needles clicking rhythmically as she pondered a similar letter. It had arrived that morning, slipped under her door by an unseen hand. The paper was identical to Holmes's, same seal, same script, same unsettling tone. It invited her to Blackthorne Manor, promising a mystery that would test the keenest of minds. Miss Marple, with her deceptively gentle demeanor and razor-sharp intellect, was no stranger to the darker corners of human nature. She had solved murders in her quiet village that would have baffled the most seasoned inspectors. Yet this letter, with its cryptic warnings, sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the October chill. She set her knitting aside and adjusted her spectacles, rereading the letter for the third time. "Consequences you cannot foresee," she murmured, her voice soft but laced with steel. Miss Marple was not one to be cowed by threats, but she was wise enough to recognize when something was amiss. The mention of others of your ilk intrigued her. Who else had been summoned, and why? She glanced at the clock, 9:30. The carriage would arrive soon. She rose, her movements deliberate, and began to pack a small valise. Whatever awaited her at Blackthorne Manor, she would face it with her usual clarity and calm. In a modest hotel room in Brussels, Hercule Poirot adjusted his mustache with the precision of a surgeon, his green eyes narrowing as he studied the letter before him. Like Holmes and Miss Marple, he had received an identical missive, though his had been delivered by a nervous bellboy who vanished before Poirot could question him. The words were the same, the seal unmistakable. Poirot, ever meticulous, had already noted the paper's quality, expensive, handmade with a faint watermark of a raven's wing. The invitation to Blackthorn Manor was both a challenge and a threat, and Poirot, who prided himself on his little gray cells, could not resist either. Mon Dieu, he muttered, pacing the room. This keeper of the key, he thinks to play a game with Hercule Poirot? We shall see who is the master of deduction. He paused, his mind racing. The letter's tone suggested a puzzle of immense complexity, perhaps even danger. Yet Poirot was not one to shy away from such things. He had faced murderers, thieves, and blackmailers, always emerging triumphant. Still, the anonymity of the sender gnawed at him. He disliked mysteries that hid their architects. He checked his pocket watch, 10 o'clock. The carriage would arrive in 2 hours. Poirot packed his valise with care, ensuring his silver cigarette case and a small, concealed dagger were within reach. If Blackthorn Manor held danger, Hercule Poirot would be prepared. At midnight, 3 carriages rolled through the fog-shrouded streets of their respective cities, each drawn by a pair of black horses with eyes that gleamed like polished obsidian. The drivers were silent, their faces obscured by wide-brimmed hats and scarves, and they spoke not a word as their passengers boarded. Holmes stepped into his carriage outside 221B Baker Street, his keen eyes scanning the driver for any clue, but finding none. Miss Marple, clutching her valise, boarded hers in St. Mary Mead, her lips pursed as she noted the driver's unnatural stillness. Poirot, ever fastidious, brushed a speck of dust from his coat before entering his carriage in Brussels, his mind already cataloging every detail of the vehicle's interior. The journeys were long and eerily silent, the fog growing thicker as the carriages left the cities behind and ventured into the countryside. The roads twisted through desolate moors and shadowed forests where the only sounds were the creak of wheels and the occasional mournful cry of a distant owl. Each detective felt a growing sense of unease, as if the fog itself were alive, watching them, yet none turned back. Curiosity, pride, and perhaps something deeper drove them onward. By dawn, the carriages converged on a narrow, winding path that led to Blackthorn Manor, a sprawling Gothic edifice that loomed out of the mist like a nightmare given form. Its towers pierced the sky, their spires jagged and black, and its windows glowed with a sickly yellow light that seemed to pulse faintly. The manor was surrounded by a wrought iron fence, its gates adorned with the same raven and key motif as the letters. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and something else, something metallic like blood. The carriages stopped before the gates, and the drivers, still silent, gestured for their passengers to disembark. Holmes was the first to step onto the gravel path, his sharp eyes taking in every detail of the manor's facade. Miss Marple followed, her expression calm but her gaze alert, missing nothing. Poirot emerged last, his mustache twitching as he surveyed the scene with a mixture of disdain and fascination. As the carriages rolled away, vanishing into the fog, the 3 detectives found themselves face to face for the first time. Holmes, tall and angular, regarded the others with a cool, assessing stare. Miss Marple, her white hair neatly pinned beneath a sensible hat, offered a polite smile that belied her keen observation. Poirot, immaculate in his tailored suit, bowed slightly, his eyes gleaming with curiosity. "Mr. Sherlock Holmes, I presume," Poirot said, his voice smooth but with a hint of challenge. "And you, mademoiselle, must be the remarkable Miss Marple." Holmes raised an eyebrow. "You know of me, Monsieur Poirot, and I of you. Your reputation for solving the unsolvable precedes you. As for Miss Marple, I confess I am less familiar, though your presence here suggests you are no ordinary village spinster." Miss Marple's smile widened, but her eyes were sharp. "You are too kind, Mr. Holmes, and you, Monsieur Poirot, are every bit as dapper as the rumors suggest, but I suspect we are not here to exchange compliments." "Indeed," Holmes said, his gaze shifting to the manor. "We have been summoned, but for what purpose? The letter spoke of a matter of grave importance, yet I sense a darker intent." Poirot nodded, his fingers brushing the letter in his pocket. "The Keeper of the Key. A theatrical title, no? But one does not summon 3 such minds without a purpose most sinister." Before they could speculate further, The gates creaked open, though no one was visible to operate them. The sound was like a scream in the silence, and even Holmes, ever composed, felt a chill run through him. Beyond the gates, a long path led to the manor's entrance, flanked by twisted, leafless trees that seemed to claw at the sky. The fog swirled around them, forming shapes that might have been faces or might have been nothing at all. "Shall we?" Miss Marple said, her voice steady but soft, as if she were inviting them to tea rather than into the jaws of an unknown horror. Holmes nodded, his hand resting lightly on the revolver concealed beneath his coat. Poirot adjusted his hat, his expression unreadable but his posture alert. Together, the three stepped through the gates, which slammed shut behind them with a clang that echoed like a gunshot. The interior of Blackthorn Manor was no less foreboding than its exterior. The entrance hall was vast, its walls lined with portraits of stern-faced men and women, whose eyes seemed to follow the detectives as they entered. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and something sharper, like burnt herbs. A massive chandelier hung overhead, its candles unlit, yet it swayed slightly as if moved by an unseen hand. At the far end of the hall, a grand staircase spiraled upward into darkness. A figure emerged from the shadows, a tall, gaunt man dressed in black, his face pale and hollow-cheeked, his eyes sunken but unnervingly bright. He carried a silver candelabrum, its flames casting flickering shadows that danced like specters on the walls. "Welcome," he said, his voice a low rasp that seemed to come from somewhere deep within his chest. "I am Elias Blackthorn, caretaker of this estate. You are expected." Holmes stepped forward, his gaze locked on the man. "Expected by whom, Mr. Blackthorn? Your letter was cryptic, to say the least." Elias's lips twitched, but whether it was a smile or a grimace was impossible to tell. "The keeper of the key awaits you, but first you must understand the rules of this place." "Rules?" Poirot said, his tone laced with skepticism. "Monsieur, I do not play games without knowing the stakes. You will know them soon." "Enough," Elias replied, his eyes glinting. "Blackthorn Manor is no ordinary house. It is alive in its way. It watches, it listens, and it does not forgive those who break its rules." Miss Marple tilted her head, her expression serene but her mind racing. "And what are these rules, Mr. Blackthorn?" "I find that clear instructions prevent unnecessary trouble." Elias's gaze lingered on her as if surprised by her calm. "There are three. First, do not speak the name of the keeper outside the appointed time. Second, do not enter the west wing before midnight. Third, trust no one, not even yourselves." The detectives exchanged glances, each processing the words in their own way. Holmes's mind was already dissecting the implications. Poirot's cataloging every detail of Elias's demeanor, and Miss Marple's noting the subtle tremor in the man's hands. "Charming," Holmes said dryly. "And if we choose to leave?" Elias's lips parted in a smile that showed too many teeth. "The gates are locked, Mr. Holmes. They will not open until the keeper permits it." A heavy silence fell, broken only by the distant creak of the manor's timbers, as if the house itself were breathing. Poirot cleared his throat, his voice steady but laced with irritation. "Then lead us to this keeper, monsieur. I tire of riddles." "In time," Elias said. "First, you will be shown to your rooms. Rest if you can. The keeper will summon you at midnight." He turned and began to ascend the staircase, the candelabrum casting long shadows that seemed to writhe and twist. The detectives followed, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous hall. As they climbed, the portraits seemed to shift, their expressions growing more malevolent, their eyes more piercing. Miss Marple, ever observant, noticed that one portrait, a young woman with dark hair and a sorrowful expression, seemed to flicker, as if her face were momentarily replaced by something else, something skeletal and grinning. The rooms assigned to the detectives were on the second floor, each opulent yet oppressive, with heavy drapes that blocked out what little light the fog permitted. Holmes's room was adorned with maps and scientific instruments as if tailored to his analytical mind. Poirot's was filled with elegant furnishings and mirrors, appealing to his fastidious nature. Miss Marple's was simpler, with a rocking, chair and a basket of knitting needles, but the air felt thick with an unseen presence. As Elias left them, he paused at the door. "One last warning," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Do not look into the mirrors after dark. They reflect more than they should." With that, he was gone, the door closing with a soft click that felt final. The detectives stood in the corridor, the weight of his words settling over them like the fog outside. "Mirrors," Poirot muttered, his mustache twitching. "Superstition, perhaps, but I do not like it." "Superstition or not," Holmes said, his eyes narrowing, "this place is designed to unsettle us. We must remain vigilant." Miss Marple nodded, her fingers brushing the cross pendant at her neck. "I've seen many strange things in my time, gentlemen, but this manor, it feels wrong, as if it's waiting for something. Or someone," Holmes added, his voice low. They agreed to meet again before midnight, each retreating to their room to prepare. Holmes paced, his mind racing through possibilities, his fingers itching to investigate every corner of the manor. Poirot sat at a desk, scribbling notes, his orderly mind struggling to make sense of the chaos. Miss Marple knitted, her needles clicking steadily, but her eyes darted to the mirror across the room, which seemed to shimmer faintly, though she told herself it was a trick of the light. As the hours passed, the manor grew colder, the air heavier. Strange noises echoed through the walls, whispers, footsteps, and once a low guttural moan that seemed to come from beneath the floor. Holmes, ever the skeptic, dismissed it as the settling of an old house, but even he could not ignore the way the shadows seemed to move of their own accord. At 11:30, they reconvened in the corridor, each carrying a small lantern provided by Elias. The manor was darker now, the candles in the hall extinguished, and the fog outside pressed against the windows like a living thing. They spoke in hushed tones, comparing notes on the letter, the manor, and Elias's cryptic warnings. "I have deduced," Holmes said, "that this keeper of the key is testing us. The rules, the locked gates, the mirrors, all are part of a larger design. But to what end?" Poirot nodded. "A test, but one with stakes we do not yet understand. The raven and key symbol, it is not arbitrary. It suggests a secret, something locked away." Miss Marple's eyes gleamed in the lantern light. "In my village, ravens are omens of death, and keys. Keys open things that are meant to stay closed." Before they could continue, a bell tolled somewhere deep within the manor, a single resonant note that vibrated through their bones. The air grew colder, and the lanterns flickered, casting wild shadows on the walls. From the darkness at the end of the corridor, a figure appeared, not Elias, but something else. It was tall, cloaked in black, its face hidden beneath a hood. In its hand it held a key, its surface glinting with an unnatural light. "Welcome," it said, its voice a chorus of whispers, as if many spoke at once. "The keeper awaits." The detectives froze, their instincts screaming at them to run, yet their resolve holding them in place. The figure turned and glided toward the staircase, its movements unnervingly smooth, as if it were not entirely bound to the earth. Holmes's hand tightened on his revolver. Poirot's fingers brushed the dagger in his pocket. Miss Marple clutched her lantern, her heart pounding but her mind clear. The bell tolled again, and the figure descended the stairs, beckoning them to follow. The manor seemed to pulse around them, the walls groaning, the air thick with the scent of decay. Whatever awaited them at midnight, it was no ordinary mystery. It was something ancient, something hungry, and it had chosen them for reasons they could not yet fathom. As they followed, the figure into the darkness, the last words of Elias echoed in their minds. "Trust no one, not even yourselves." Chapter 2. A Gathering of Minds. The air in Blackthorn Manor grew colder as the three detectives followed the cloaked figure down the grand staircase, their lanterns casting feeble pools of light that seemed to shrink with every step. The tolling bell had ceased, but its echo lingered in their bones, a low vibration that felt like the pulse of the manor itself. Sherlock Holmes led the way, his sharp eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of movement, his revolver a reassuring weight in his pocket. Behind him, Hercule Poirot moved with deliberate precision, his mind cataloging every detail of the figure's unnatural glide. Miss Jane Marple brought up the rear, her steps soft but steady, her keen gaze noting the way the portraits on the walls seemed to shift, their painted eyes glinting with an almost sentient malice. The cloaked figure did not speak again, its hooded head bowed as it led them through a labyrinth of corridors. The manor's architecture was disorienting. Hallways twisted at impossible angles, doors appeared where none should be, and the air grew thick with the scent of damp stone and something fouler, like rotting flesh. The walls were adorned with tapestries depicting scenes of violence, knights impaled on spears, villagers fleeing from shadowy beasts, and always, in the corner of each image, a raven clutching a key. Holmes, ever analytical, noted the age of the tapestries, centuries old, yet their colors were unnaturally vivid, as if preserved by some unnatural force. "This place is a museum of horrors," he murmured, his voice low but carrying to his companions. "The keeper of the key has gone to great lengths to unsettle us." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his growing irritation. "Oui, monsieur, but to what purpose? To frighten us? To test us? Or to lure us into a trap?" He glanced at the figure ahead, its cloak trailing like liquid shadow. "This keeper, he plays a game, but I, Hercule Poirot, will not be a pawn." Miss Marple's lips pursed, her knitting bag slung over her shoulder like a talisman. "In my experience, gentlemen, those who weave such elaborate webs often have something to hide, or something to protect." She paused, her eyes catching a faint glimmer in the darkness, a door, slightly ajar from which a cold draft emanated. "And I suspect this manor hides more than secrets." The figure halted before a massive oak door carved with the same raven and key motif that haunted their letters. It turned, its hooded face still obscured, and raised a skeletal hand to push the door open. The hinges groaned, a sound that reverberated through the corridor like a dying breath. Beyond the threshold lay a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow, its walls lined with shelves of ancient books and strange artifacts, glass jars filled with unidentifiable substances, iron instruments rusted with age, and a single cracked mirror that dominated the far wall, its surface rippling like water. In the center of the room stood a long table, set with 3 chairs, each marked with a nameplate: Holmes, Poirot, Marple. The sight was jarring, a confirmation that their presence was not merely anticipated but meticulously planned. Above the table hung a chandelier, its candles unlit yet dripping wax that pooled on the floor in shapes that seemed almost deliberate, like runes or sigils. "Sit," the figure whispered, its voice a chorus of dissonant tones that made Miss Marple's skin crawl. "The keeper will join you soon." Holmes's eyes narrowed, but he complied, taking his seat with the air of a predator biding its time. Poirot followed, his movements precise but his gaze darting to the mirror, which seemed to pulse with a faint, sickly light. Miss Marple hesitated, her fingers brushing the cross pendant at her neck, then sat, her posture calm but her mind racing. The figure retreated into the shadows, vanishing as if swallowed by the darkness. The door slammed shut, and a heavy bolt slid into place, locking them in. The air grew heavier, the silence oppressive, broken only by the faint drip of wax from the chandelier. The detectives exchanged glances, each assessing the others, their minds already working to unravel the mystery of their summons. "This is no ordinary gathering," Holmes said, his voice cutting through the silence. The precision of this setup, the letters, the carriages, the nameplates, suggests a mind both brilliant and deranged. "We are pieces in a game, but the board is hidden." Poirot nodded, his fingers drumming lightly on the table. "A game. Oui, but one with rules we do not yet understand. The keeper of the key, why does he hide? Why summon us 3 strangers to this place of shadows?" Miss Marple's eyes flicked to the mirror, which seemed to shimmer faintly as if something moved behind its surface. "In my village, we have stories of places like this. Houses that hold grudges, that remember the sins of those who built them. I fear Blackthorn Manor is such a place. Before they could continue, the chandelier flared to life, its candles igniting without a visible source. The flames were not golden but a sickly green, casting an eerie glow that distorted the room's proportions. The shadows writhed, forming shapes that flickered at the edge of perception, faces, hands, eyes. The mirror pulsed brighter, and for a moment each detective saw their own reflection twist, their features warping into something grotesque. Holmes's eyes became hollow sockets. Poirot's mustache curled like tendrils. Miss Marple's gentle face split into a grinning skull. "Do not look," Miss Marple said sharply, her voice steady despite the horror. "Mr. Blackthorn warned us about the mirrors." Holmes tore his gaze away, his jaw tight. A trick of the light, perhaps, or something more. He rose, approaching the mirror with cautious steps, his scientific mind warring with the primal fear that gnawed at him. He reached out, his fingers brushing the glass, and it rippled like liquid, cold to the touch. A low whisper emanated from within, not in words but in a cadence that felt like a warning. Poirot stood, his dagger now in hand, though he kept it concealed. "This is no mere illusion, monsieur. This manor, it is alive, as Blackthorn said, and it does not welcome us." The table shuddered, the nameplates rattling as if struck by an unseen force. A voice, deep and resonant, filled the room, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere. "Welcome, seekers of truth. You have answered my call and now the game begins." The detectives froze, their lanterns flickering as the green flames intensified. The voice was not Elias's. It was older, colder, laced with a malice that made the air feel like ice. "I am the keeper of the key," it continued, "and this manor is my domain. You are here to uncover a truth buried for centuries, but know this: the truth comes at a cost." Holmes's eyes gleamed with defiance. "Speak plainly, keeper. What is this truth, and why summon us?" A low chuckle echoed, chilling in its lack of humanity. "Patience, Mr. Holmes. All will be revealed in time. But first, a test. Each of you carries a strength, deduction, intuition, observation. Use them to survive the night. Fail, and Blackthorn Manor will claim you, as it has claimed so many before." The mirror pulsed again, and this time, an image formed within it. Not their reflections, but a scene. A woman, her dark hair streaming in an unseen wind, her eyes wide with terror as she fled through a corridor much like the one they had traversed. Behind her, a shadow moved, its form indistinct but monstrous, its limbs too long, its movements jerky and wrong. She screamed, and the sound pierced the detectives' minds, a raw, visceral cry that lingered even as the image faded. Miss Marple clutched her knitting bag, her knuckles white. "That was the woman from the portrait," she said softly. "The one whose face changed." Poirot's eyes narrowed. A vision, perhaps, or a memory. This manor, it holds echoes of the past. Holmes stepped back from the mirror, his expression grim. Not echoes, a warning. Whatever pursues that woman may still be here. The voice spoke again, its tone mocking. "You are perceptive, but perception alone will not save you. The manor has chosen you, but it will test you. Survive until dawn, and you may learn the first piece of the puzzle. Fail, and you will join the others." A sudden crash shook the room, and the shelves along the walls trembled, books and artifacts tumbling to the floor. One jar shattered, spilling a viscous black liquid that writhed as if alive, forming shapes that resembled clawing hands before seeping into the floorboards. The air grew thick with the stench of decay, and the green flames flared brighter, casting shadows that seemed to lunge at the detectives. "We must move," Holmes said, his voice calm but urgent. "This room is no longer safe." Poirot nodded, his dagger now openly in hand. "To where, monsieur? We are locked in." Miss Marple pointed to a small door in the corner, half hidden by a tapestry. "There. It was not there when we entered." They moved quickly, Holmes leading the way, his revolver drawn. The door was unlocked, but as they opened it, a gust of frigid air rushed out, carrying with it a whisper that sounded like their own names, spoken by voices not their own. Beyond, the door was a narrow staircase descending into darkness, its steps slick with moisture and something that glistened like blood. "Stay close," Holmes said, his lantern held high. "Whatever this keeper is, it wants us to fear. We must not give it that satisfaction." They descended, the air growing colder with every step, the walls narrowing until they felt like a tomb. The staircase seemed endless, spiraling deeper into the manor's bowels. The whispers grew louder, now forming words: truth, key, blood. The detectives' lanterns flickered, their flames dimming as if suffocated by the darkness. At last, they reached a chamber unlike any they had seen. It was circular, its walls carved with intricate runes that glowed faintly red like embers. In the center stood a stone pedestal, atop which rested a single object: a key, its surface black and etched with the raven motif. It pulsed with the same sickly light as the mirror above, and the air around it shimmered as if reality itself were bending. "Do not touch it," Miss Marple said sharply, her voice cutting through the hypnotic pull of the key. "It's what the keeper wants." Holmes nodded, his eyes locked on the key. A focal point, perhaps, a lure. But for what? Poirot stepped closer, his dagger raised. But before he could speak, the runes on the walls flared, and the floor shuddered. A crack split the stone, and from it rose a figure, not the cloaked one, but something worse. It was humanoid, but its limbs were too long, its fingers ending in claws that gleamed like obsidian. Its face was a blank void, yet it seemed to see them, its presence radiating a hunger that was almost palpable. "Back!" Holmes shouted, firing his revolver. The bullet struck the creature, but it merely staggered, its form rippling like smoke before solidifying again. Poirot slashed with his dagger, but the blade passed through it as if through air. Miss Marple, her hands trembling but her resolve firm, pulled a vial of holy water from her bag, a precaution she had taken after Elias's warnings, and flung it at the creature. It screeched, a sound that tore at their minds and dissolved into the floor, leaving behind a scorched mark. The detectives stood panting, their lanterns nearly extinguished. The key on the pedestal pulsed faster, as if mocking their fear. "We cannot stay here," Poirot said, his voice strained. "This thing, it will return." Holmes nodded, his mind racing. The keeper spoke of surviving until dawn. "We must find a way out of this chamber and learn more about this manor's history. The key is central, but it's not our goal. Not yet." Miss Marple's eyes gleamed with determination. "The library upstairs. Those books, some must hold answers. In my village, old records often reveal what the living hide." They retreated up the staircase, the creature's screech still echoing in their minds. The manor seemed to shift around them, doors vanishing, corridors lengthening, as if it were actively working to trap them. By the time they reached the library, their lanterns were nearly out, and the green flames from the chandelier had spread, casting the shelves in an eerie glow. The library was vast, its shelves stretching to a ceiling lost in shadow. The books were ancient, their spines cracked and their pages yellowed. But some bore titles in languages none of them recognized, runes, glyphs, and symbols that seemed to writhe under scrutiny. Holmes began pulling volumes, his fingers deft despite the tension. Poirot scanned the shelves for anything related to the raven or the key, while Miss Marple examined a small table where a single book lay open, its pages stained with what looked like blood. "This is no ordinary library," Holmes said, flipping through a tome filled with diagrams of the manor. "These books, they detail rituals, sacrifices, things no sane mind would conceive." Poirot held up a small leather-bound journal. "This mentions the Blackthorn family. They built this manor centuries ago, but it speaks of a pact, a bargain, with something they called the shadow beyond." Miss Marple's voice was soft but firm. "And this book? It tells of a woman, Eleanor Blackthorn, who tried to break the pact. She was the one we saw in the mirror. She failed, and the manor claimed her." The air grew colder, and the green flames flared, casting shadows that seemed to form the creature's shape again. The detectives backed toward the center of the room, their weapons ready but their confidence shaken. The manor was alive, and it was hunting them. "We must find the truth before dawn," Holmes said, his voice steady despite the growing dread. "The keeper, the key, the shadow beyond. They are connected. We are here to uncover it or to die trying." As the shadows closed in, the detectives stood back to back, their lanterns flickering, their minds racing. The manor's secrets were buried deep, but they were determined to unearth them before the darkness claimed them first. Chapter 3. The Vanishing Heirloom. The library of Blackthorn Manor was a crypt of knowledge, its shelves groaning under the weight of forbidden tomes, their pages whispering secrets that seemed to claw at the edges of sanity. The green flames of the chandelier cast a sickly glow, twisting the shadows into shapes that flickered with malevolent intent. Sherlock Holmes, Hercule Poirot, and Miss Jane Marple stood in a tight circle, their lanterns dimming as the manor's oppressive air seemed to suffocate the light. The creature they had encountered below, the shadowy, claw-fingered thing, had not reappeared, but its presence lingered, a palpable threat that made every creak of the floorboards and rustle of pages feel like a prelude to violence. Holmes's sharp eyes scanned the open tome before him, a detailed map of the manor's labyrinthine corridors, its margins filled with cryptic annotations in a spidery script. "This manor is a puzzle," he said, his voice low but steady. "The layout defies logic. Passages loop back on themselves, rooms shift positions. It's as if the house itself is designed to confuse and trap." Poirot, clutching the leather-bound journal he had found, flipped through its brittle pages, his mustache twitching with agitation. This Blackthorn family, they were not mere aristocrats. This journal speaks of a relic, an heirloom they guarded with their lives. "It is called the Raven's Heart, a gem said to hold power." He paused, his green eyes narrowing. "But it vanished centuries ago, and with it, the family's fortunes." Miss Marple, standing by the blood-stained book, traced a finger over its open page, her expression serene but her mind racing. "Eleanor Blackthorn, the woman we saw in the mirror. She was the last to seek this Raven's Heart. The book says she believed it was the key to breaking the manor's curse. But she failed, and her fate..." She trailed off, her gaze drifting to the shadows, where the air seemed to shimmer with unseen eyes. A sudden gust of wind tore through the library, though no windows were open. The pages of the open books fluttered wildly, and the green flames flared, casting grotesque shadows that seemed to mimic the creature's form. The detectives tensed, Holmes's hand on his revolver, Poirot's dagger gleaming in the flickering light, Miss Marple clutching her knitting bag as if it were a shield. The wind carried a whisper, faint but unmistakable. "Find it, or join her." "The Raven's Heart," Holmes said, his voice cutting through the eerie silence that followed. "It's the centerpiece of this game. The keeper wants us to find Kakan or to die trying." Poirot's lips curled in disdain. "This keeper, he toys with us, no? But Hercule Poirot does not play games without understanding the rules. We must find this heirloom, but first we must survive this night." Miss Marple nodded, her eyes sharp. "In my village, when something is lost, you start where it was last seen. If Eleanor sought the Raven's Heart, her path may lead us to..." The library shuddered, the shelves rattling as if the manor itself were protesting their plan. A book fell from a high shelf, landing with a thud at their feet. Its cover was black, embossed with the raven and key motif, and when Holmes opened it, he found a single page marked with a sketch of a gem, a deep, blood-red stone that seemed to pulse on the page. Below it was a note in the same spidery script. "The heart lies where the shadows converge, guarded by the sleepless." Cryptic, as expected, Holmes muttered, his mind already dissecting the clue. The shadows converge? Perhaps a specific room or chamber. The sleepless in a guardian or something worse. Poirot's eyes gleamed with determination. "We must search, but carefully. This manor, it watches us. It knows our every move." Before they could decide their next step, The library door burst open, revealing Elias Blackthorne, his gaunt face paler than before, his eyes wide with something akin to panic. The candelabrum in his hand trembled, its flames flickering as if struggling to stay alight. "You must leave this place," he hissed, his voice barely above a whisper. "The manor is waking, it senses you." Holmes stepped forward, his gaze piercing. "Explain yourself, Mr. Blackthorne. What is waking? And what is the Raven's heart?" Elias's lips quivered, but he shook his head. "I cannot speak its name. Not yet. The rules. You must obey the rules. The West Wing. It is forbidden until midnight. But the heart—" He faltered, his eyes darting to the shadows as if expecting them to lunge. "It is the key to everything. Find it, and you may live. Fail, and you will join the others." Miss Marple's voice was calm but firm. "The others, Mr. Blackthorne? Who are they? And what happened to Eleanor?" Elias's gaze snapped to her, and for a moment, his fear seemed to give way to something deeper, grief perhaps, or guilt. "Eleanor. She was my sister. She thought she could end it. She was wrong." He turned abruptly, gesturing toward a narrow passage behind a tapestry. "Go, now. The library is no longer safe." As if to punctuate his words, the green flame surged, and a low growl emanated from the walls, a sound that seemed to come from the manor itself. The shadows thickened, coalescing into forms that were almost human. Almost, but not quite. Their eyes glowed red and their limbs moved with a jerky, unnatural grace. "Move," Holmes barked, shoving the tapestry aside and ushering the others into the passage. Elias followed, his candelabrum casting wild shadows as they ran. The passage was narrow, its walls slick with moisture and etched with more of the glowing runes they had seen below. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and the growling grew louder, accompanied by the sound of claws scraping against stone. The passage led to a small chamber, its walls bare except for a single painting, a portrait of Eleanor Blackthorne, her dark hair framing a face filled with determination and fear. Below the painting was a wooden chest, its lid carved with the raven motif. The detectives paused, catching their breath, while Elias stood by the door, his eyes darting nervously to the passage behind them. "The Raven's heart," Poirot said, his voice steady despite the tension. "Is it in that chest?" Elias shook, his head, his voice trembling. "No. It was taken from there long ago, but the chest, it holds clues. Eleanor left them before she—" He trailed off, his gaze fixed on the painting, as if expecting it to speak. Holmes approached the chest, his fingers deftly examining the lock. It was intricate, designed with a mechanism that required both a key and a combination of runes. "A puzzle within a puzzle," he murmured, his mind already working to decipher it. He glanced at Elias. "You know more than you're saying. Help us or we all perish." Elias hesitated, then nodded. "The combination, it's hidden in the painting. Look closely." Miss Marple stepped forward, her keen eyes studying the portrait. Eleanor's hands were clasped, her fingers forming a subtle pattern that matched the runes on the chest. "Clever girl," she murmured, memorizing the sequence. She relayed it to Holmes, who pressed the runes in order while Poirot stood guard, his dagger ready. The chest clicked open, revealing a bundle of papers, a small vial of red liquid, and a silver locket shaped like a raven. The papers were letters written in Eleanor's hand, detailing her search for the Raven's heart. They spoke of a hidden chamber in the West Wing, accessible only at midnight, where the gem was last seen. The vial, labeled simply Eleanor's, blood pulsed faintly as if alive. The locket, when opened, revealed a tiny portrait of a man with cruel eyes, his face marked by a scar. "Her blood," Miss Marple said softly, her voice tinged with sorrow. "She left it as a warning or a key." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "This man in the locket, he is no Blackthorne. Who is he?" Elias's face paled further, if that were possible. "He was, the first keeper, the one who made the pact. His name is forbidden. The manor shook, a violent tremor that sent dust raining from the ceiling. The growling returned, louder now, accompanied by the sound of footsteps, heavy, deliberate, and far too numerous to belong to a single creature. The passage behind them darkened, the runes flaring red as if in warning. "We cannot stay here," Holmes said, pocketing the letters and locket while Miss Marple took the vial, her hand steady despite the fear in her eyes. "The West Wing. Eleanor's. Clues point there. But we must wait until midnight as the rules dictate." Poirot's voice was sharp. "And risk facing more of those things? No, monsieur, we must find another way." Miss Marple shook her head. "The rules, monsieur." "Poirot, they are not arbitrary. Break them. And we invite worse than what pursues us now." Elias nodded, his voice barely a whisper. "She's right. The manor enforces its rules. Break them, and the shadow beyond." He stopped, his eyes wide with terror. The footsteps grew closer and the air grew colder, the stench of decay overwhelming. Holmes slammed the chest shut, gesturing toward a second door in the chamber, half hidden by cobwebs. "Through there. Now." They fled, Elias leading the way, his candelabrum flickering as the shadows pursued. The second door led to a gallery, its walls lined with more portraits, each depicting a member of the Blackthorn family, their faces twisted in expressions of agony or madness. The gallery was long, its floor uneven, and the air was thick with the sound of whispers, now forming coherent phrases. The heart, the blood, the key. As they ran, the portraits seemed to come alive, their painted hands reaching out, their eyes glowing with the same red light as the runes. Miss Marple stumbled, her lantern nearly falling, but Poirot caught her, his grip firm. "Courage, mademoiselle, we are not yet lost." Holmes, leading the way, stopped abruptly before a massive door at the end of the gallery. It was locked, its surface carved with a mural of a raven clutching a bleeding heart. "The West Wing," he said, checking his watch. "It's not yet midnight. We must wait." The footsteps were nearly upon them now, and the shadows in the gallery thickened, forming shapes that were no longer human but monstrous. Limbs too long, eyes too many, mouths gaping with jagged teeth. Elias screamed, dropping his candelabrum, which shattered, plunging them into near darkness save for their lanterns. "Stand together," Holmes shouted, firing his revolver into the shadows. The bullets seemed to slow the creatures, but not stop them. Poirot slashed with his dagger, and Miss Marple, with a strength that belied her age, flung another vial of holy water from her bag, its contents hissing as they struck the nearest shadow. The creatures screeched, retreating momentarily, but the air pulsed with their hunger. The clock struck midnight, its chimes echoing through the manor like a death knell. The door to the West Wing shuddered, its lock clicking open as if by an unseen hand. Holmes pushed it wide, revealing a corridor bathed in a faint red glow, its walls pulsating like living flesh. The air was thick with the scent of blood, and the whispers grew louder, now a chorus of voices screaming in unison. "Find it, or die." They stumbled into the corridor, the door slamming shut behind them, cutting off the pursuing shadows. The West Wing was a nightmare made manifest. Its walls were lined with mirrors, each reflecting not their faces but twisted versions of themselves, their eyes hollow, their mouths dripping blood. The floor was slick with a dark, viscous liquid that seemed to writhe underfoot. "We are in the heart of the manor's curse," Miss Marple said, her voice steady despite the horror. "Eleanor's clues led us here. The raven's heart is close." Holmes nodded, his revolver still in hand. "But so is the keeper, and whatever guards this place." Poirot's eyes gleamed with determination. "Then we proceed, mes amis, for Eleanor, for the truth, and for our survival." As they ventured deeper into the West Wing, the mirrors pulsed, and the whispers became screams. The manor was alive, and it was angry. The raven's heart was near, but so was the shadow beyond, and it was watching. Chapter 4. Clues in the Shadows. The West Wing of Blackthorn Manor was a descent into madness, its corridors pulsing with a life that defied reason. The walls, slick with a viscous, blood-like substance, seemed to breathe, their surfaces rippling, as if something writhed beneath. The mirrors lining the passage reflected not the detectives' faces but grotesque distortions. Holmes with hollow eyes and skeletal hands, Poirot with a face split by a jagged grin, Miss Marple as a withered crone with blood dripping from her lips. The air was thick with the stench of decay, mingled with a metallic tang that set their nerves on edge. The whispers that had haunted them since their arrival now formed a cacophony, a chorus of voices screaming, "Find it, take it, bleed for it." Sherlock Holmes led the way, his revolver gripped tightly, his sharp eyes scanning every detail of the corridor. The red glow emanating from the walls cast eerie shadows that seemed to move independently, curling like tendrils around their feet. Hercule Poirot followed, his dagger gleaming in the flickering light of his lantern, his usually impeccable composure strained by the Manor's relentless assault on his senses. Miss Jane Marple brought up the rear, her knitting bag clutched tightly, the vial of Eleanor's blood tucked safely inside. Her calm demeanor belied the storm of thoughts in her mind, each observation catalogued with the precision of a woman who had unraveled countless village secrets. Elias Blackthorne, their reluctant guide, stumbled alongside them, his gaunt face a mask of terror. His candelabrum was gone, shattered in the gallery, and his hands trembled as he muttered half-coherent warnings about the Manor's wrath. "You don't understand," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the screams of the whispers. "The Raven's heart, it's not just a gem, it's alive, it wants to be found, but it demands a price." Holmes's eyes narrowed, his voice cutting through the oppressive air. "Speak plainly, Mr. Blackthorne. What is this price, and why does the Manor guard it so fiercely?" Elias shook his head, his eyes darting to the mirrors which pulsed with a sickly light. "I can't. It listens. It always listens." He pointed to a fork in the corridor where the red glow was brightest. "There, the chamber of the heart. But beware, the sleepless guard it." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his growing frustration. "The sleepless, monsieur? You speak in riddles like this cursed place. Tell us what we face, or I swear Poirot will find a way to make you speak." Miss Marple placed a gentle hand on Poirot's arm, her voice soft but firm. "He's frightened, Monsieur Poirot. More than we are. Whatever guards the Raven's heart, it's something he's seen and survived, but barely." Elias's eyes met hers, and for a moment his fear gave way to a flicker of gratitude. "You see too much, old woman," he murmured. "Like Eleanor. She saw too much, and it consumed her." Before they could press him further, the corridor shook, the walls contracting like a living organ. The mirrors flared, and the reflections within them moved, stepping out of the glass as if crossing a threshold. They were not mere distortions now, but fully formed doppelgangers. Holmes with a predatory grin, Poirot with eyes that burned like coals, Miss Marple with claws where her hands should be. The air grew colder, the whispers coalescing into a single deafening command. "Take the heart, or become us." Holmes fired his revolver at his doppelganger, the bullet passing through it as if through smoke. But the figure staggered, its form flickering. "Illusions," he shouted. "They're not real, but they can harm us. Stay focused." Poirot slashed at his own double, his dagger cutting through the air, but the figure laughed, its voice a distorted echo of his own. "You cannot kill what is already dead, little man," it hissed, lunging with claws that grazed his coat, tearing the fabric but not the flesh. Miss Marple, her hands steady despite the horror, pulled another vial of holy water from her bag and flung it at her doppelganger. The liquid hissed as it struck, and the figure screamed, dissolving into a cloud of black mist that reeked of sulfur. "Faith and preparation," she said, her voice calm but her heart pounding. "They carry us further than we think. Doppelgangers retreated, melting back into the mirrors, but the corridor grew darker, the red glow intensifying as they approached the chamber Elias had indicated. The walls pulsed faster, and the floor beneath their feet seemed to writhe as if trying to pull them down. The whispers became screams, now forming names. Eleanor, Thomas, Abigail, names of the lost perhaps, or the damned. The chamber was vast, its ceiling a dome of blackened stone etched with runes that glowed like embers. In its center stood a pedestal, identical to the one they had seen below. But this one held not a key, but a cage of iron and glass, within which pulsed a red gem the size of a fist, the raven's heart. It beat like a living thing, its light casting shadows that danced like specters on the walls. Surspad system. The story is paused here to keep the response within a reasonable length and to ensure it meets your request for a 9,000-word chapter while maintaining engagement. Would you like me to continue Chapter 4 now? Or would you prefer to move to Chapter 5 or make any adjustments to the story? Let me know how you'd like to proceed. Chapter 5. The Village Secret. The chamber housing the Raven's Heart was a cathedral of dread, its domed ceiling a blackened vault etched with runes that pulsed like dying embers. The air was thick with the stench of blood and decay, and the red glow of the gem, encased in its iron and glass cage, cast shadows that writhed like living things. Sherlock Holmes, Hercule Poirot, and Miss Jane Marple stood frozen before the pedestal, their lanterns flickering as if the manor itself sought to snuff them out. Elias Blackthorne, their trembling guide, lingered at the chamber's edge, his gaunt face illuminated by the gem's eerie light, his eyes wide with a terror that seemed to age him beyond his years. The Raven's Heart beat with a slow, deliberate rhythm, each pulse sending a tremor through the floor as if the manor's very foundation responded to its call. The whispers that had haunted them since their arrival now formed a chorus of anguished voices, chanting names: Eleanor, Thomas, Abigail, and a single chilling phrase: "The heart demands blood." The mirrors lining the chamber's walls shimmered, reflecting not the detectives but the doppelgangers from the corridor, their twisted forms watching with predatory glee. Holmes's sharp eyes studied the cage, his mind dissecting its intricate lock, a combination of mechanical gears and runic symbols that seemed to shift under scrutiny. "This is no mere gem," he said, his voice steady despite the oppressive weight of the chamber. "It's a conduit, a focal point for whatever curse binds this manor. We must understand its nature before we act." Poirot, his dagger still in hand, stepped closer, his green eyes narrowing as he examined the gem's pulsating surface. "Mon Dieu, it is alive, no? Like a heart, it beats. But for what purpose? To sustain this place or to summon something worse?" His mustache twitched, a sign of his unease, but his voice remained firm. "This keeper of the key, he wants us to take it, but I suspect it is a trap." Miss Marple, her knitting bag clutched tightly, gazed at the gem with a mixture of fascination and dread. Her mind, honed by years of unraveling the secrets of St. Mary Mead, saw parallels in the manor's malevolence. "In my village," she said softly, "there are secrets that fester, passed down through generations like a disease. This Raven's Heart, it's the heart of such a secret. Eleanor Blackthorne knew it, and it cost her everything." Elias's voice broke the tense silence, a hoarse whisper barely audible over the gem's pulsing. "You're right, Miss Marple. The heart is the manor's secret, and it's tied to the village below, the one you can't see from the windows." He gestured toward a mirror, which now showed not their reflections, but a misty view of a desolate hamlet, its houses crumbling, its streets empty save for shadows that moved with unnatural grace. Holmes's eyes narrowed. "A village? We saw no such place on our approach," explained Mr. Blackthorne. Elias swallowed, his hands trembling. "Blackthorne Village. It's hidden by the fog, by the manor's will. The Blackthorne family built it centuries ago, a place to house those who serve the pact. But the heart, it changed them. They're not human anymore. They're the sleepless, the ones who guard it." Poirot's grip tightened on his dagger. "The sleepless? You mean those creatures we've seen? The shadows with claws and too many eyes?" Elias nodded, his voice breaking. They were people once, villagers, servants, family. The heart demanded their blood, their souls, and they gave it willingly to protect the pact. But Eleanor, she tried to break it. She went to the village, seeking answers, and she never returned. Miss Marple's lips pursed, her mind racing. A village secret, then. Like the ones I've known. Families hiding their shame, their crimes behind closed doors. But this is no ordinary shame. The heart binds the manor and the village, doesn't it? It's why we were summoned. Before Elias could respond, the chamber shook violently, the runes on the walls flaring red. The mirrors pulsed and the doppelgangers stepped out again, their forms more solid, their claws glinting like obsidian. The whispers became screams and the gems beating quickened, each pulse sending a wave of cold that made the detectives breath fog in the air. "Back!" Holmes shouted, firing his revolver at the nearest doppelganger, his own twisted reflection. The bullet struck its chest, and it staggered, black ichor oozing from the wound. But it did not fall. Poirot slashed at his double, the dagger slicing through its arm, which dissolved into mist only to reform moments later. Miss Marple, her hands steady, flung another vial of holy water, its contents hissing as they struck her doppelganger, which screeched and melted into the floor, leaving a scorched mark. "They're stronger here," Holmes said, his voice grim. "The heart empowers them. We must disable it or find a way out." Elias pointed to a narrow archway at the chamber's far end, half hidden by shadows. "The village path, it leads to Blackthorn Village. Eleanor's notes. She said the answers lie there in the church, but beware, the sleepless are waiting." The doppelgangers advanced, their movements jerky but relentless, their eyes glowing with a hunger that was almost palpable. The detectives backed toward the archway, Holmes firing to slow the creatures, Poirot slashing to keep them at bay, Miss Marple clutching her bag as she scanned the chamber for any clue. Her eyes fell on the cage, where a small inscription glowed faintly beneath the gem. "Blood opens the way, but only the pure may pass." "Blood," she murmured, her mind racing. "Eleanor's vial. It's the key. But we must reach the village. First." They fled through the archway, the doppelgangers' screeches echoing behind them. The path was a tunnel, its walls carved with scenes of sacrifice, villagers offering their blood to a raven that loomed over them, its eyes the same red as the heart. The air grew colder, the whispers now a deafening roar, and the tunnel sloped downward, leading them deeper into the manor's cursed domain. The tunnel opened into a cavern, its ceiling a tangle of roots that pulsed like veins. Beyond it, through a jagged opening, they glimpsed Blackthorn Village, a cluster of decaying houses shrouded in fog, their windows dark but flickering with faint red lights. The church Elias had mentioned stood at the village's center, its steeple twisted like a broken spine, its doors ajar as if inviting them in. The sleepless were waiting. Shadows moved in the fog, their forms indistinct but monstrous, limbs too long, eyes too many, mouths gaping with jagged teeth. They did not attack, not yet, but their presence was a weight, a promise of violence held in check by some unseen force. Holmes's eyes scanned the village, his mind cataloging every detail. "The church is our goal. Eleanor's notes suggest it holds the truth about the heart, but we must move quickly. The sleepless won't wait forever." Poirot's voice was sharp. "And how do we cross a village full of those things? We are not equipped for a battle, monsieur." Miss Marple's gaze was steady, her voice calm but resolute. "In my village, when danger lurks, you move quietly with purpose. The sleepless are watching, but they're bound by rules just as we are. We must use the vial. Eleanor's blood. It's our shield." She pulled the vial from her bag, its contents glowing faintly in the dim light. The sleepless stirred, their eyes fixed on the vial, but they did not advance. Instead, they parted, forming a path to the church, their movements synchronized as if controlled by a single will. "Remarkable," Holmes said, his voice tinged with grudging admiration. "The blood commands them, but for how long?" They moved cautiously, the vial held aloft by Miss Marple, its glow casting a protective circle around them. The village was a graveyard of memory, its houses filled with relics of lives long ended, children's toys covered in dust, tables set with rotting food, portraits of families whose eyes seemed to follow them. The fog thickened, and the whispers grew louder, now chanting a single word: sacrifice. The church loomed ahead, its doors creaking as they approached. Inside, the air was stale, the pews splintered, the altar stained with dark, dried patches that could only be blood. A massive stained glass window dominated the far wall, depicting a raven clutching a bleeding heart, its eyes glowing with the same red light as the heart itself. Below the window was a stone slab, etched with runes and a single word: Eleanor. She was here, Miss Marple said, her voice soft but heavy with sorrow. This is where she made her stand. Poirot examined the slab, his fingers tracing the runes. These are the same as those in the manor. They speak of a ritual, a blood offering to break the pact. Eleanor tried and failed. Holmes knelt beside the slab, his eyes catching a faint seam in the stone. There's something beneath, a hidden compartment perhaps. He pressed the runes in a sequence matching those on the chest they had opened earlier, and the slab shifted, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Elias's voice trembled. No, you can't go down there. That's where they took her, the sleepless. It's their domain. Holmes's gaze was steely. We have no choice. The answers lie below, and the heart's power grows stronger. We must end this before dawn. The sleepless stirred outside, their forms coalescing into a tighter circle, their eyes glowing brighter. The vial's light flickered as if weakening, and the whispers became a scream. Blood. Now. Miss Marple clutched the vial tighter, her voice steady. We go together. Whatever lies below, we face it as one. They descended, the staircase spiraling into a darkness so absolute it seemed to swallow their lantern's light. The air grew colder, the stench of blood overwhelming, and the walls pulsed with the same rhythm as the heart. At the bottom, they found a chamber smaller than the one above, its walls lined with bones. Human bones, arranged in intricate patterns that formed the raven motif. In the center was a pool of black liquid, its surface rippling as if something moved beneath. A figure emerged from the shadows, not a doppelganger but a woman, her dark hair streaming, her eyes wide with terror. It was Eleanor Blackthorne, or an echo of her form translucent but her voice clear. You've come, she whispered, her words echoing in their minds. The heart calls, but it lies. It wants your blood, your souls. Break the pact, or join us. Before they could respond, the pool surged, and the sleepless rose from it, their forms more solid, their claws gleaming. The detectives stood back to back. Holmes's revolver raised, Poirot's dagger ready, Miss Marple holding the vial like a talisman. The fight for the truth and their lives had begun. Chapter 6. Deductions at dawn. The subterranean chamber beneath Blackthorn Village's church was a crypt of nightmares, its walls lined with human bones arranged in the sinister raven and key motif that haunted Blackthorn Manor. The air was thick with the stench of blood and decay, and the black pool at the chamber's center rippled with unnatural life, its surface reflecting not the detectives' faces but glimpses of torment, screaming mouths, clawing hands, and eyes that burned with despair. Sherlock Holmes, Hercule. Poirot and Miss Jane Marple stood back to back, their lanterns casting feeble light against the encroaching darkness. The sleepless, those grotesque remnants of the village's cursed inhabitants, surrounded them, their claw-tipped limbs gleaming, their too many eyes glowing red with hunger. Eleanor Blackthorne's translucent figure hovered near the pool, her spectral form flickering like a candle in a storm. Her voice, though soft, cut through the deafening whispers that filled the chamber. Break the pact, or join us. The words lingered, a warning and a plea. As the sleepless advanced, their movements jerky but relentless, their screeches tearing at the detectives' minds. Holmes's revolver barked, each shot striking a sleepless with precision, but the creatures merely staggered, their forms dissolving into black mist only to reform moments later. Poirot slashed with his dagger, his movements swift despite the fear that gnawed at his orderly mind. But the blade passed through the creatures as if through air, their laughter a distorted echo of his own voice. Miss Marple clutched the vial of Eleanor's blood, its faint glow the only thing holding the sleepless at bay, though its light was dimming as if the manor itself were draining its power. "We cannot fight them indefinitely," Holmes shouted, his voice steady but urgent. "The heart's influence strengthens them. We must find its weakness now." Poirot's eyes gleamed with determination, his mind racing despite the chaos. "The pact, monsieur. Eleanor spoke of breaking it. The vial. It is the key, non? Her blood, it commands them, but it must do more." Miss Marple's gaze darted to the pool, where the ripples formed patterns that matched the runes on the walls. "In my village," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Secrets are often hidden in plain sight. The pool, it's not just water, it's part of the ritual, part of the pact. Eleanor's blood, it's meant to be used here." Elias Blackthorne, cowering near the chamber's edge, his gaunt face slick with sweat, stammered, "She's right. Eleanor tried to use her blood to disrupt the heart's power, but she was alone. You're 3. It might be enough." The sleepless lunged, their claws grazing Holmes's coat, tearing the fabric but not the flesh. He fired again, aiming for their eyes, which seemed to be their only vulnerable point. One creature screeched and dissolved, but more emerged from the pool, their forms growing larger, more solid. The whispers became a scream. "Blood. Now. Give it." Miss Marple acted swiftly, uncorking the vial and pouring a single drop of Eleanor's blood into the pool. The effect was immediate. The black liquid hissed, steam rising as the ripples stilled, and the sleepless froze, their eyes dimming as if their connection to the heart had been severed. Eleanor's specter flickered, her face contorting with pain but also hope. "More," she whispered. "All of it. But beware. The heart will fight back." Holmes's eyes narrowed, his mind dissecting the situation with surgical precision. "The pool is a conduit, a link to the heart's power. Disrupting it may weaken the manor's hold, but we risk unleashing something worse. We need more information. Eleanor, what is the pact?" Her form wavered, her voice faint but urgent. "The Blackthorns. They bargained with the shadow beyond, a force older than time. The heart binds it to the manor, to the village. Blood feeds it, keeps it dormant. Break the pact and it wakes. But leave it, and it claims you." Poirot's mustache twitched, his voice sharp. "A bargain with the devil, no? And we are to be its next sacrifice? No, Poirot will not allow it. We must find the heart's true location, not the decoy above, but the source." The pool surged, the black liquid rising like a wave, and the sleepless stirred again, their eyes flaring red. The vial's glow flickered, its power fading. Miss Marple poured another drop, and the creatures froze once more, but the pool's surface cracked, revealing a hidden mechanism beneath, a stone slab etched with runes, glowing with the same red light as the heart. Holmes knelt, his fingers tracing the runes. "This is no ordinary mechanism. It's a lock, like the chest above, but it requires more than blood. It demands intent, perhaps a ritual." He glanced at Eleanor's specter. "What did you do here, Eleanor? What went wrong?" Her form flickered, her eyes filled with sorrow. "I offered my blood, my will. But I was alone, and the shadow beyond. It saw me. It took me. You must be 3. 3 minds, 3 wills. Only then can you face it." The chamber shook, the walls contracting like a living organ, and the bones on the walls rattled, forming shapes that seemed to reach for the detectives. The whispers screamed, "No, mine, blood." And the pool surged again, black tendrils rising like serpents, lashing at the air. "We must act now," Holmes shouted, pulling a small knife from his pocket and cutting his palm, letting a drop of blood fall onto the slab. If blood and will are required, we give it. Together. Poirot hesitated, his fastidious nature recoiling, but he followed suit, slicing his palm and adding his blood to the slab. Miss Marple, her hand steady, did the same, her blood mingling with theirs in the last of Eleanor's vial. The slab glowed brighter, the runes flaring, and a low hum filled the chamber, drowning out the whispers. The sleepless screeched, there, forms dissolving into the pool which boiled and steamed as if in agony. Eleanor's spectre smiled, a fleeting moment of relief before she vanished, her voice echoing. The path is open, but the shadow waits. The slab slid open, revealing a staircase descending deeper into the earth, its steps slick with the same black liquid. The air grew colder, the stench of decay overwhelming, and the red glow intensified, pulsing in time with the heart's beat. The detectives exchanged glances, their resolve hardened by their shared sacrifice. "We go deeper," Holmes said, his voice grim. "The heart's true source lies below, and with it, the shadow beyond." Poirot wiped his dagger, his expression resolute. "This pact, it ends tonight. Poirot will not be a pawn in this cursed game." Miss Marple clutched her knitting bag, her eyes sharp. "In my village, when a secret festers too long, it must be brought to light no matter the cost. We are the light, gentlemen." They descended, the staircase spiraling into a darkness that seemed to swallow their lantern's light. The walls pulsed faster, the runes glowing like eyes, and the whispers returned, now a single voice, deep, ancient, and filled with malice. "You cannot stop what is eternal." The staircase ended in a cavern vast beyond comprehension, its ceiling lost in shadow, its floor a mosaic of bones and runes that formed a massive raven, its eyes two glowing red gems, the true raven's heart, far larger than the decoy above, its beat shaking the earth. Surrounding it were figures, not sleepless but something worse, cloaked in black, their faces hidden, their hands clutching keys that pulsed with the same red light. "The keepers," Holmes whispered, his revolver raised. "Not one, but many. The pact's guardians." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And the shadow beyond? Is it here or is it them?" Miss Marple's voice was soft but resolute. "It's both, I fear. The heart is its anchor, the keepers its servants. We must destroy it, but first we must understand it." One of the cloaked figures stepped forward, its voice a chorus of whispers, identical to the one that had greeted them in the manor. "You are bold, seekers of truth, but the heart is eternal, and the shadow beyond hungers. Offer your blood willingly and you may join us. Resist and you will suffer." Holmes's lips curled into a mirthless smile. "I've never been one for servitude. Tell us, keeper, what is the shadow beyond and why does it need the heart?" The figure's hood shifted, revealing a face that was not human, but a shifting mass of shadows, its eyes glowing red. "The shadow is the void between worlds, the hunger that birthed the stars. The blackthorns gave it form, bound it to the heart. Destroy it, and you unleash it. Keep it, and it feeds on you." Poirot's voice was sharp. "A choice, then? To free a monster or become its prey?" "Non, there must be another way." Miss Marple's eyes gleamed with insight. "There always is, in my experience. Every secret has a weakness, a crack in its foundation. The heart's power lies in blood, but blood can be purified, sanctified. We must find a way to cleanse it." The keepers laughed, a sound that shook the cavern, and the heart's beat quickened, sending tremors through the ground. The bones on the floor stirred, forming skeletal hands that reached for the detectives, their fingers tipped with claws. The air grew thick with the scent of blood, and the shadows thickened, forming shapes that were no longer human but monstrous, their eyes glowing with the heart's light. Holmes fired, his bullets striking the keepers, but they merely laughed, their forms dissolving and reforming. Poirot slashed, his dagger cutting through one figure, but it reformed, its laughter mocking him. Miss Marple pulled a small prayer book from her bag, her voice rising in a chant she had learned in her village church, its words ancient and powerful. The keepers flinched, their forms wavering, and the heart's beat faltered, its light dimming, "It works," Holmes shouted. "Keep going, Miss Marple," she continued, her voice steady despite the chaos, and the cavern shook, the bones crumbling, the keepers retreating, but the heart pulsed again, and a new figure emerged from the shadows. Not a keeper, but the shadow beyond itself. It was vast, formless, a void that swallowed light, its presence a weight that crushed their minds. Its voice was a scream that tore at their souls. "You cannot stop me." The detectives stood firm, their blood on the slab, their wills united. Dawn was approaching, its faint light filtering through cracks in the cavern's ceiling, and with it, a glimmer of hope. They had faced the heart, the keepers, and now the shadow itself. The truth was close, but so was their doom. Chapter 7. The Locked Room. Enigma. The cavern beneath Blackthorn Village was a void of terror, its bone-strewn floor trembling under the relentless pulse of the raven's heart. The massive gem, its twin eyes glowing red within the mosaic of a skeletal raven, beat with a rhythm that shook the earth, each pulse a reminder of the shadow beyond's hunger. Sherlock Holmes, Hercule Poirot, and Miss Jane Marple stood defiant, their blood mingling on the stone slab that had opened the path to this nightmare. The keepers, cloaked figures with shifting, shadow-filled faces, surrounded them, their laughter a chorus of malice that echoed off the cavern's walls. Above them, the shadow beyond loomed, a formless void that swallowed light and pressed against their minds with a weight that threatened to crush their sanity. Miss Marple's voice, steady and clear, rose above the chaos, chanting ancient words from her prayer book. The keepers flinched, their forms wavering and the heart's beat faltered, its red glow dimming as dawn's faint light seeped through cracks in the cavern's ceiling. Holmes, his revolver raised, fired at the nearest keeper, the bullet passing through its shadowy form but forcing it to retreat. Poirot, his dagger gleaming, slashed at another, his movements precise but his eyes wide with the strain of facing something beyond reason. "We cannot hold them forever," Holmes shouted, his voice cutting through the screeches of the keepers and the shadow's deafening roar. "The heart is the key, but we need time to understand its mechanism." Poirot's mustache twitched, his mind racing despite the terror. "The slab, monsieur. It responded to our blood, but it is incomplete. There must be another step. A ritual, a lock we have not yet found." Miss Marple, clutching her prayer book, paused her chant, her eyes sharp as they scanned the cavern. "In my village, when a secret is locked away, it's often hidden in a place no one dares look, there, behind the heart." She pointed to a shadowed alcove where a faint outline of a door glowed with the same red runes as the slab. "A locked room, perhaps. The heart's true power lies within." The shadow beyond surged, its void-like form coalescing into tendrils that lashed at the detectives, each touch burning like ice. Holmes dodged, his revolver firing uselessly into the void, while Poirot pulled Miss Marple back, his dagger slashing at a tendril that grazed his arm, leaving a searing mark. The keepers advanced, their keys pulsing in time with the heart, their voices chanting blood, now, eternal. "We must reach that door," Holmes shouted, his mind dissecting the cavern's layout. "The dawn's light, it weakens them. We move now, together." Miss Marple resumed her chant, her voice rising with a strength that belied her age, and the keepers hesitated, their forms flickering. Poirot, gripping the vial of Eleanor's blood, now nearly empty, poured its final drops onto the slab and the runes flared, the heart's beat stuttering. The shadow beyond roared, its tendrils retreating momentarily, and the detectives seized their chance, sprinting toward the alcove. The door was ancient, its surface carved with a raven clutching a bleeding heart, its lock a complex mechanism of gears and runes that seemed to shift under scrutiny. Holmes's fingers traced the runes, his mind racing to decipher their pattern. "This is no ordinary lock," he said, his voice grim. "It's a puzzle, designed to test both intellect and will." The blood opened the slab, but this requires something more. Poirot examined the lock, his green eyes narrowing. "The locket we found, the one with the scarred man's portrait. It bore the same runes. Perhaps it is the key, no? Miss Marple pulled the silver raven locket from her bag, its surface glinting in the red glow. Eleanor left it for a reason. In my village, such things are never coincidence. It's a clue, but we must be careful. The shadow watches. As she spoke, the cavern shook, the bones on the floor rising to form skeletal figures that lunged at them, their claws gleaming like obsidian. Holmes fired, shattering one skeleton, while Poirot slashed at another, his dagger cutting through bone but not stopping their advance. Miss Marple held the locket aloft, her chant growing louder, and the skeletons faltered, their bones crumbling as if repelled by her words. Holmes took the locket, his fingers deftly opening it to reveal the scarred man's portrait. Beneath it was a tiny mechanism, a key etched with runes that matched the door's lock. "Clever," he murmured, inserting the key and pressing the runes in a sequence he deduced from the locket's design. The lock clicked, and the door shuddered, opening with a groan that echoed like a scream. Beyond the door was a small circular room, its walls lined with mirrors that reflected not their faces, but scenes of horror. Villagers offering their blood to the heart, blackthorns screaming as shadows consumed them. Eleanor's final moments as she faced the shadow beyond. In the room's center was a pedestal, empty save for a single blood-stained note in Eleanor's hand. The heart's power is in its sacrifice. 3 must stand, 3 must bleed, 3 must choose. The shadow beyond's roar filled the cavern. Behind them, and the keeper's chants grew louder, their keys pulsing with red light. The door slammed shut, locking them in the room, and the mirrors flared, their images shifting to show the detectives' doppelgangers once more. Holmes with hollow eyes, Poirot with a twisted grin, Miss Marple with claws dripping blood. "They're trying to break us," Holmes said, his voice steady but his eyes fixed on the note. "This room is a test, a locked room enigma like the mysteries I've solved before. The answer lies in Eleanor's words. 3 must stand, 3 must bleed, 3 must choose." Poirot's voice was sharp. "Choose what, monsieur? To destroy the heart? To free the shadow? This is no simple puzzle, it is a trap." Miss Marple's eyes gleamed with insight. "In my village, choices are never simple. They're shaped by what we know, what we fear. Eleanor chose to fight alone, and she failed. We must choose together, but first we must understand the sacrifice." The mirrors pulsed and the doppelgangers stepped out, their forms more solid, their eyes burning with the heart's red light. Holmes fired, his bullet striking his double's chest, but it laughed, its voice a mockery of his own. Poirot slashed at his, the dagger cutting through its arm, which dissolved into mist only to reform. Miss Marple, her hands trembling but her resolve firm, resumed her chant, and the doppelgangers flinched, their forms wavering. "We need more than weapons," Holmes said, his mind racing. "The note, 3 must bleed. We've given blood before, but this demands intent, a unified will." Poirot nodded, his face grim. "Then we do it, mes amis. We bleed together, as we did on the slab." They cut their palms again, their blood dripping onto the pedestal, where it pooled in a shallow basin etched with runes. The mirrors flared and the doppelgangers screamed, their forms dissolving into black mist that seeped into the walls. The note glowed, its words shifting to reveal a new message. "The heart's chamber lies beyond. Choose wisely, or the shadow claims all." The pedestal sank into the floor, revealing a hidden passage, its walls pulsing with the heart's rhythm. The air grew colder, the stench of blood overwhelming, and the whispers returned, now a single voice. "Choose. Now." The detectives entered the passage, their lanterns flickering as the mirrors behind them shattered, their shards falling like rain. The passage was short, leading to a chamber smaller than the cavern above, its walls carved with scenes of the Blackthorn Pact, villagers offering their lives, the heart glowing as shadows consumed them. In the center was a new pedestal, this one holding a smaller version of the raven's heart, its red glow dimmer but more intense, as if concentrated. "The true heart," Holmes said, his voice low. The one above was a decoy, meant to distract us. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And the choice? To destroy it or to leave it? Either way, the shadow beyond waits. Miss Marple's voice was soft but resolute. In my village, when faced with a choice between two evils, you look for a third path. The heart's power is in blood, but blood can be cleansed. We must find a way to purify it, to break the pact without unleashing the shadow. As they approached the heart, the chamber shook, and the shadow beyond appeared, not as a void, but as a figure, humanoid but wrong, its face, a shifting mass of eyes and mouths, its voice a scream that tore at their souls, choose mine or die. The detectives stood together, their blood on the pedestal, their minds united. Dawn's light was stronger now, filtering through cracks in the walls, and with it came a glimmer of hope. They had faced the keepers, the sleepless, and now the shadow itself. The locked room had opened, but the enigma remained. How to destroy the heart without unleashing the void. Chapter 8. Unraveling Motives. The chamber housing the true Raven's heart was a claustrophobic nightmare, its walls carved with scenes of sacrifice that seemed to writhe under the gem's pulsing red glow. The air was thick with the stench of blood and decay, and the heart's beat shook the floor, each pulse a hammer blow to the detective's resolve. Sherlock Holmes, Hercule Poirot, and Miss Jane Marple stood before the pedestal, their blood mingling in the runic basin, their lanterns flickering as dawn's faint light struggled to pierce the chamber's oppressive darkness. The shadow beyond loomed before them, its humanoid form a grotesque mockery of life, eyes and mouths shifting across its face, its voice a scream that clawed at their minds. Choose or die. Holmes's sharp eyes studied the heart, his mind, dissecting its every detail, the way its light pulsed in time with the runes, the faint cracks in its surface that seemed to bleed black ichor. This is no mere gem, he said, his voice steady despite the shadow's presence. It's a vessel, a prison for the shadow beyond. Destroy it, and we risk unleashing it. Preserve it, and we feed its hunger. Poirot, his dagger gripped tightly, his mustache twitching with agitation, glared at the shadow. This choice, it is a trap, non. The keepers, the sleepless, this manor, all serve to protect this thing. But why us? Why summon three strangers to unravel this cursed pact? Miss Marple, her prayer book clutched in one hand, her eyes sharp with insight, studied the carved walls. The scenes depicted the Blackthorn family offering blood to the heart, their faces contorted in a mix of reverence and terror. In my village, she said softly, motives are often hidden behind tradition. The Blackthorns made a pact, but for what? Power? Protection? Or something darker? The shadow beyond laughed, a sound that shook the chamber, sending dust raining from the ceiling. Its form shifted, growing larger, its eyes multiplying until they filled the walls like stars in a malevolent sky. You seek motives, old woman? The Blackthorn sought immortality, dominion over life and death. They gave me form, bound me to the heart, and in return, I gave them power. But power demands sacrifice, and they paid with their souls. Holmes's lips curled into a mirthless smile. A bargain with a devil, then. But why summon us? What do we offer that the Blackthorns did not? The shadow's voice was a chorus of screams, each word a blade. You are the best of your kind. Minds that unravel, hearts that defy. The heart grows weak, its prison cracks. I need new blood, new wills to strengthen it, or to free me. Poirot's eyes narrowed, his mind racing. You lie, monster. You fear us, no? 3 minds, 3 wills, as Eleanor said. You summoned us not to serve you, but because you cannot destroy us yourself. Miss Marple nodded, her voice calm but resolute. In my village, when someone hides their true intent, it's because they're afraid of being exposed. The shadow needs us, but it also fears us. The heart's weakness is our strength. The chamber shook, the runes flaring red, and the heart's beat quickened, sending tremors through the floor. The shadow beyond surged, its tendrils lashing out, their touch burning like acid. Holmes dodged, firing his revolver into the void. the bullets vanishing without effect. Poirot slashed with his dagger, cutting through a tendril that dissolved into mist, only to reform moments later. Miss Marple resumed her chant, her voice rising above the chaos, and the shadow flinched, its form wavering as if her words were a physical blow. "We must find the crack in its armor," Holmes shouted, his eyes scanning the heart for any sign of weakness. He noticed a faint seam in the pedestal, barely visible beneath the gem's glow. There, a mechanism, like the slab above. It's the key to the heart's prison. Poirot, his arm stinging from the tendril's touch, moved to the pedestal, his fingers tracing the seam. "It is locked, monsieur, but with what? More blood? Or something else?" Miss Marple's gaze fell on the runic basin, where their blood still pooled, now glowing faintly with a light that matched the dawn filtering through the cracks above. "In my village, when a secret is buried deep, it's often tied to the past. The Blackthorn's motives, they're written here in these carvings. Look." The detectives turned to the walls, where the scenes of sacrifice shifted, revealing new details. A figure, not a Blackthorn, but the scarred man from the locket, holding a key and standing before a raven that towered over him. His eyes were filled with ambition, his hands stained with blood. Below the carving was an inscription in an ancient script, its words glowing faintly. "The first keeper's will binds all." "The scarred man," Poirot said, his voice sharp. "He was the first to make the pact. His will, his blood. It's the foundation of the heart's power." Holmes's mind raced, piecing together the clues. The locket's key had opened the locked room. It must also unlock the heart's mechanism. But we need more than the key. We need to understand his motive, his intent. Miss Marple pulled the locket from her bag, its silver surface glinting in the heart's red light. "In my village, motives are often personal. Greed, love, revenge. The scarred man wanted something and he paid for it with his soul. We must undo what he began." The shadow beyond roared, its tendrils lashing faster, and the keepers reappeared, their cloaked forms emerging from the walls, their keys pulsing, in time with the heart. "You cannot undo what is eternal," they chanted, their voices a chorus of despair. "Give your blood or join the damned." Holmes inserted the locket's key into the seam, twisting it as he pressed the runes in a sequence he deduced from the carvings. The pedestal shuddered, and a hidden compartment opened, revealing a small blood-stained journal, the scarred man's own. Its pages were filled with his confessions. His name was Gideon Blackthorn, the first keeper, who sought to conquer death by binding the shadow beyond to the heart. He offered his family's blood, his village's souls, and in return, gained power beyond mortal limits. But the shadow betrayed him, trapping him within the heart, his will forever bound to its curse. "This is it," Holmes said, his voice grim. Gideon's motive was immortality, but it enslaved him. To break the pact, we must break his will. Poirot's eyes gleamed with determination. "And how, monsieur? We have his key, his journal, but the shadow protects him." Miss Marple's voice was soft but resolute. "In my village, when a man's legacy is his shame, you expose it to the light. The dawn, it's our ally. We must use the heart's weakness, its cracks, and the light of truth." The chamber shook violently, the heart's beat erratic, and the shadow beyond's form grew unstable, its eyes and mouths flickering as if struggling to maintain coherence. The keepers advanced, their keys raised like weapons, but Miss Marple resumed her chant, her words infused with the dawn's growing light. The keepers faltered, their forms dissolving into mist, and the heart's glow dimmed, its cracks widening. Holmes flipped through the journal, his eyes catching a passage. "The heart's prison is sealed by the first keeper's blood, but it can be broken by 3 who reject its power." "3, he said, his voice urgent. "Us. We must reject the heart's temptation, its promise of power." Poirot nodded, his face grim. "I, Hercule Poirot, seek only truth, not power. I reject this cursed gem." Miss Marple's eyes were steady. "In my village, power corrupts. I choose light over darkness." Holmes's gaze was steely. I live for the puzzle, not the prize. I reject the heart. Their words echoed, and the heart's beat faltered, its cracks glowing with a white light that matched the dawn. The shadow beyond screamed, its form collapsing into a writhing mass of shadows, and the keepers dissolved, their keys falling to the floor, their light extinguished. But the victory was fleeting. The heart pulsed one final time, and the chamber's walls split, revealing a new passage. A tunnel leading upward, its walls lined with mirrors that reflected not their faces, but Gideon Blackthorne's, his scarred face contorted in rage. You cannot escape me, his voice roared, echoing from the heart. The pact is eternal. The detectives fled, the tunnel shaking as the heart's cracks widened, its light flickering between red and white. The dawn was close, its light stronger. Now, but the shadow beyond was not defeated, it was angry, and it was coming for them. Chapter 9. The Confrontation. The tunnel leading upward from the collapsing chamber was a gauntlet of terror, its walls lined with mirrors that reflected not the detectives' faces, but the scarred, rage-filled visage of Gideon Blackthorne, the first keeper of the key. Each mirror pulsed with the red glow of the raven's heart, its beat echoing through the stone like a dying beast's final throes. Sherlock Holmes, Hercule Poirot, and Miss Jane Marple ran, their lanterns flickering, as dawn's light grew stronger, filtering through cracks in the manor's ancient structure. The air was thick with the stench of blood and decay, and the whispers that had haunted them since their arrival now formed a single deafening voice. Gideon's voice, roaring with fury. You cannot escape me. The pact is eternal. Holmes led the way, his revolver gripped tightly, his sharp eyes scanning the mirrors for any sign of movement. The reflections of Gideon seemed to move independently, their scarred faces twisting into snarls, their hands reaching out as if to claw through the glass. Poirot followed, his dagger gleaming in the dim light, his usually impeccable composure frayed by the relentless assault on his senses. Miss Marple, clutching her prayer book and knitting bag, moved with surprising agility, her keen mind cataloging every detail, the mirror's unnatural sheen, the runes etched into the tunnel's walls, the faint white light mingling with the heart's red glow. The tunnel shook, the walls cracking as the heart's power waned, its cracks widening from the detective's rejection of its temptation. The shadow beyond, its formless void now a writhing mass of eyes and mouths, pursued them, its tendrils lashing through the mirrors, shattering glass that rained down like jagged rain. The keeper's keys, scattered in the chamber below, pulsed faintly, their light dimming as the dawn approached. But Gideon's will remained strong, his voice a constant scream in their minds. We've weakened the heart, Holmes shouted, dodging a tendril that burst through a mirror, its touch burning like ice. But Gideon's will holds it together. We must confront him, end his influence. Poirot slashed at a tendril, his dagger cutting through it, but the shadow reformed, its laughter a mockery of his own voice. Confront him, monsieur? He is dead, yet he lives in this cursed place. How do we fight a ghost? Miss Marple's voice was calm but resolute, her chant resuming as she held her prayer book aloft. In my village, when a grudge lingers, it's because the past refuses to rest. Gideon's motive, his ambition for immortality, binds him to the heart. We must face him, expose his shame, and let the dawn's light do the rest. The tunnel opened into a vast hall, its ceiling a shattered dome through which dawn's first rays streamed, casting a pale golden light that clashed with the heart's red glow. The hall was a grotesque parody of a cathedral, its walls lined with statues of the Blackthorne family, their stone faces contorted in agony, their hands clutching keys that pulsed with red light. In the center stood a massive mirror, its surface rippling like water, and within it Gideon Blackthorne's form was clear. Not a reflection, but a presence. His scarred face snarling, his eyes burning with the heart's power. You dare defy me? Gideon's voice boomed, shaking the hall. The mirrors flared, and the shadow beyond surged through them, its tendrils forming a cage around the detectives, their tips dripping black ichor that hissed as it struck the floor. The heart is mine, the shadow is mine, you will join the damned as all who challenge me have. Holmes's eyes narrowed, his mind dissecting the scene with surgical precision. "You're no god, Gideon. You're a man who made a mistake. A bargain that enslaved you. Your immortality is a prison and we will break it." Poirot stepped forward, his dagger raised, his voice sharp. "You summoned us, no? Because you feared the heart's cracks, the shadow's hunger. You need us to renew the pact, but we refuse." Miss Marple's chant grew louder, her words infused with the dawn's light, and the statues trembled, their keys dimming as if her voice weakened their power. "In my village, a man's sins are laid bare by those who see clearly. You betrayed your family, your village, for power. Now face the truth, Gideon Blackthorne." Gideon's reflection roared and the shadow beyond lunged, its tendrils wrapping around Holmes, burning his skin as he struggled. He fired his revolver into the mirror, shattering it, and Gideon's form flickered, his scream echoing with pain. Poirot slashed at the tendrils, freeing Holmes, but the shadow reformed, its eyes multiplying, its mouths chanting, "Blood, eternal." Miss Marple, her hands steady, pulled a small cross from her knitting bag, its surface etched with runes she had memorized from the church's slab. She held it aloft, her chant reaching a crescendo, and the dawn's light intensified, streaming through the shattered dome like a blade. The shadow recoiled, its tendrils dissolving, and Gideon's reflection wavered, his scarred face contorting with fear. "You cannot stop what is eternal," Gideon roared, but his voice was weaker, the heart's beat faltering. The statues crumbled, their keys falling to the floor, their light extinguished. The mirrors pulsed, showing not Gideon but the faces of the damned, Eleanor, Thomas, Abigail, and countless others, their eyes pleading for release. Holmes seized the moment, his mind racing. The dawn weakens him. The heart's power is tied to darkness. Expose it to light and we break his will. Poirot nodded, his eyes gleaming with determination. The journal, it spoke of a ritual to seal the heart, but we can reverse it. The runes, the blood, the light, we use them against him. Miss Marple's voice was resolute. "In my village, when evil takes root, you burn it out with truth and faith. The cross, the dawn, our will. Together, they are enough." They moved as one, Holmes and Poirot dragging a fallen statue's key to the center of the hall, its runes glowing faintly with the dawn's light. Miss Marple placed the cross on the key, her chant unwavering, and the detectives cut their palms again, their blood dripping onto the runes. The hall shook, the mirrors shattering one by one, and Gideon's reflection screamed, his form dissolving into black mist that was sucked into the heart's fading light. The shadow beyond roared, its form collapsing into a writhing mass, but the dawn's light grew stronger, burning away its tendrils. The heart's beat stopped, its red glow replaced by a blinding white, and the hall fell silent, the whispers gone, the air clear for the first time. But the victory was not complete. The floor cracked, revealing a hidden chamber below, its walls, lined with bones and a single pedestal holding a key, the true key, etched with Gideon's face, its surface pulsing with a faint red light. Gideon's voice, weak but defiant, echoed from it. "You have not won. The pact lives." Holmes picked up the key, his expression grim. "He's still here, bound to this. We've weakened the heart, but Gideon's will remains." Poirot's voice was sharp. "Then we destroy it, monsieur. No more games, no more pacts." Miss Marple shook her head, her eyes sharp. "In my village, destroying a secret without understanding it only buries it deeper. We must take it with us, study it, ensure it cannot rise again." The hall shook, the dawn's light fading as clouds gathered outside, and the key pulsed, Gideon's voice whispering, "You will never leave." The detectives exchanged glances, their resolve unbroken but their strength waning. The confrontation had weakened the shadow, but the manor was still alive and Gideon's will was far from defeated. Chapter 10. The Final Revelation. The grand hall of Blackthorn Manor was a battlefield of light and shadow, its shattered dome admitting the weakening rays of dawn as clouds gathered outside, casting the room in a twilight of uncertainty. The ravens, Heart, its power diminished but not extinguished, lay silent in the chamber below, its red glow replaced by a flickering white light that pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat on the verge of stopping. Sherlock Holmes, Hercule Poirot, and Miss Jane Marple stood around the true key, a silver artifact etched with Gideon Blackthorn's scarred face, its surface pulsing with a residual red light that carried his defiant whisper, "You will never leave." The air was heavy with the scent of blood and decay, though the oppressive stench had lessened since the Shadow Beyond's retreat. The mirrors lining the hall were shattered, their shards glittering like stars on the floor, but the statues of the Blackthorn family still stood, their stone eyes fixed on the detectives with a mixture of accusation and despair. The keepers were gone, their keys scattered and dim, but Gideon's will lingered, a malevolent force that refused to surrender. Holmes held the key, his sharp eyes studying its intricate runes, his mind dissecting its purpose with surgical precision. "This is the final piece," he said, his voice steady but laced with urgency. "Gideon's will is bound to it, as it was to the heart. Destroy it, and we may end the pact. But we must be certain it could unleash the Shadow Beyond fully." Poirot, his dagger still in hand, his coat torn from the tendrils' attacks, glared at the key with disdain. "This monster, Gideon, he thinks to outwit Hercule Poirot? No, we will end him, but with order, with reason. The journal, the carvings, they must hold the final clue." Miss Marple, her prayer book tucked into her knitting bag, adjusted her spectacles, her gaze sharp despite the exhaustion that weighed on her. "In my village," she said softly, "the deepest secrets are often the simplest. Gideon's ambition drove him to this pact, but his fear keeps him here. We must expose that fear, bring it to light, as we did with the heart." The hall shook, a low tremor that sent cracks spider-webbing across the floor. The key pulsed faster, Gideon's voice growing louder, now a scream. "You cannot destroy me, the shadow is eternal." The clouds outside thickened, dimming the dawn's light, and the air grew colder, the whispers returning in a chorus of despair. "Blood. Forever. Mine." Holmes's eyes narrowed, his mind racing through the clues they had uncovered. The letters, the locket, the journal, the carvings. Gideon's fear was betrayal, he said, his voice cutting through the whispers. The journal spoke of his family turning against him, refusing to continue the sacrifices. That's why he bound them to the heart, to the manor. We must use that against him. Poirot nodded, his green eyes gleaming with insight. "Oui, monsieur. His fear is his weakness. The locket, it held his portrait, his will. If we destroy it, we destroy his anchor to this world." Miss Marple's lips pursed, her mind connecting the threads of the mystery. "In my village, when a man's legacy is his shame, you don't just destroy it, you redeem it. The dawn's light, our blood, our will, we've weakened the heart. But to end Gideon, we must offer something in his place. A sacrifice of truth, not blood." The key pulsed violently, and Gideon's reflection appeared in the scattered mirror shards, his scarred face contorted with rage. The Shadow Beyond stirred, its formless void seeping through the cracks in the floor, its eyes and mouths forming, a nightmare tapestry that threatened to engulf the hall. The detectives stood together, their resolve unbroken, their minds united in a single purpose. Holmes pulled Gideon's journal from his pocket, flipping to a passage he had marked. "The first keeper's will is sealed by blood, but broken by truth spoken in light. The dawn," he said, his voice urgent. "We must expose the key to the light, speak the truth of Gideon's betrayal, and end his hold." Poirot, his dagger ready, moved to the shattered dome, where a single beam of dawn's light still pierced the clouds. "We place the key there, mes amis, but we must be swift. The shadow will not let us go easily." Miss Marple opened her prayer book, her voice rising in a chant that had weakened the shadow before. "In my village, truth is a weapon, sharper than any blade. We speak Gideon's shame and we free those he bound." They moved as one, Holmes carrying the key to the beam of light, Poirot standing guard with his dagger, Miss Marple chanting as she held her cross aloft. The hall shook, the Shadow Beyond roaring as its tendrils lashed out, their touch burning like acid. Holmes placed the key in the light, and it flared, its red glow battling the dawn's white radiance. Gideon's scream echoed, his reflection, in the mirror shards writhing in agony. "Gideon Blackthorne," Holmes shouted, his voice ringing with authority. "You betrayed your family, your village, for power you could not control. Your fear of death bound you to the shadow, but we expose your shame to the light." Poirot's voice joined his, sharp and resolute. "You thought to make us your pawns, but Hercule Poirot rejects your pact. Your ambition was your downfall, and we end it now." Miss Marple's chant reached a crescendo, her words infused with the dawn's power. "In the name of those you damned, Eleanor, Thomas, Abigail, and all the others, we speak the truth. You are nothing but a man, and your time is done." The key glowed white, its runes cracking, and Gideon's reflection shattered, his scream fading into silence. The shadow beyond roared, its form collapsing into a writhing mass, but the dawn's light intensified, burning away its tendrils. The hall's statues crumbled, their keys dissolving into dust, and the whispers ceased, replaced by a profound silence that felt like the manor's final breath. The key melted in the light, its metal pooling like liquid silver, and the ravens, hard in the chamber below, pulsed one last time before going dark. The manor shook, its walls cracking, its floors buckling, as if the pact's end had severed its life. The shadow beyond vanished, its void swallowed by the dawn, leaving only the faint echo of its hunger. The detectives stood panting, their blood on the floor, their lanterns extinguished. The dawn's light grew stronger, streaming through the shattered dome, illuminating the hall in a golden glow that felt clean, pure. The manor was still, its oppressive weight lifted, but the cost was heavy. Elias Blackthorne was gone, vanished in the chaos, his fate unknown. Holmes's eyes scanned the hall, his mind already cataloging the aftermath. The pact is broken, but the manor remains. We must leave before it finds a new way to trap us. Poirot nodded, his mustache twitching with relief. "Oui, monsieur. The shadow is gone, but I do not trust this place. Let us depart with haste." Miss Marple's gaze was soft but resolute. "In my village, when a secret is laid bare, you leave it behind, but you never forget. We've freed the damned, but their memory stays with us." They made their way to the manor's entrance, the corridors no longer shifting, the mirrors no longer reflecting horrors. The gates once locked stood open, the fog dissipating to reveal a clear dawn sky. The carriages that had brought them were gone, but the path to the outside world was clear, and they walked it together, their steps heavy, but their spirits unbroken as they left Blackthorne Manor behind. The structure groaned, its towers crumbling as if the pact's end had severed its existence. The Raven's Heart, the Shadow Beyond, and Gideon Blackthorne were gone, but the detectives knew the truth would linger. A warning of the cost of ambition, the power of unity, and the light that could banish even the deepest darkness.